Follow us today to an American dystopian science fiction called Westworld 1973. Before we start, be aware, there are spoilers. As our story begins, we see a presenter interviewing people who have just returned from a place called Delos, a unique holiday experience where they've interacted with lifelike robots in different settings. They are Western World, the American Old West, Medieval World, Medieval Europe, and Roman World, the ancient Roman city of Pompeii, all for up to $1,000 a day, a huge amount of money back in the time. Delos' tagline in this advertising promises, "Boy, have we got a vacation for you." Now, we see two men named Peter and John in a hovercraft on their way to Westworld, talking about shooting a six-shooter. They arrive at the resort and descend in an elevator down to where they're taken by electric carts to the preparation rooms. Now, we're in the control room where all the resort's robots and facilities are monitored and adjusted. Peter and John arrive in Westworld by stagecoach and check into the Grand Hotel. We see another man called Banker who has come to Westworld and now he's practicing his fast draw in front of the mirror. Peter and John walk into the saloon and order drinks. Peter wants a martini, but John has to remind him that this is the Old West. As Peter is drinking his whiskey, a cowboy known as the Gunslinger walks past and bumps him, spilling his drink. The cowboy gets a drink and starts insulting Peter. John urges Peter to shoot him. Peter challenges the cowboy and everyone runs and hides for cover. The Gunslinger lets Peter draw first, so he shoots the Gunslinger 3 times and he falls to the floor. Back in their room, Peter wonders about shooting a guest by accident. John assures him it can't happen, and Peter tries to shoot John, but a sensing device doesn't allow the gun to fire at anything with a body temperature. In Medieval World, we see another guest as a medieval knight, enjoying the realism and beautiful women at a banquet. Back in the West World, Peter and John are having dinner with the other hotel guests. It's not long before they're taking 2 of the girls named Cindy and Arlette upstairs when they hear gunshots. It seems that the bank is being robbed. John assures Peter that taking the girls upstairs will be more fun than fighting bank robbers. After the fun, Arlette leaves and John comes in and they talk about how much fun they're having. While John and Peter sleep in their hotel rooms, the Delos staff drive around the streets collecting the dead robots so they can be taken back for repairs. They seem to be having a lot of malfunctions with the robots. In a board meeting, the chief supervisor is discussing the issues with the administrators. The next morning, we see the operators in the control room about to activate the robots for another day. Peter is waking up happy. John is having a shave when there's a knock at the door. As he opens the door, the gunslinger walks in, pointing his gun at John. Peter approaches John's door and hears the conversation inside. He draws his gun, kicks in the door, and shoots the gunslinger so many times till he falls backwards through the window and down to the street below. The sheriff has Peter locked in jail, but John tells him it was self-defense. The sheriff tells John the judge will probably hang Peter. Outside, John gets an Indian girl to take a tray of food to Peter. Peter reads a note that's on the tray, then puts on his hat. John takes their horses to the front of the jail and waits. Suddenly, the cell wall explodes outwards and Peter climbs through the hole and runs to his horse. When the sheriff runs out to stop them, John shoots him dead and then they ride out of town. They sit for a while and talk about going back to town because now there's no law, so they can do what they want. Now, we see control room operators making adjustments for Medieval World. The medieval knight comes to the queen and she tells him that tomorrow he must fight the Black Knight. The control room makes the preparations for the fight. One of the operators is confirming the appointment of the new sheriff. We see the banker outside the sheriff's office. He is now the new sheriff. Peter and John are still out of town talking when a rattlesnake bites John on the arm. They both shoot the snake, but John's upset because that's not supposed to happen. In the control room, the supervisor is also surprised. He orders for the snake to be brought in for examination. The chief supervisor says they'll have to close the resort for a month till they can sort out all the problems. In the saloon, a bar fight starts, but John and Peter sit calmly playing cards, until a cowboy crashes down from above and breaks their table. So, they join the fight. The sheriff walks in and he joins in the fight as well. Back in the castle, the medieval knights try to have his way with one of the servants named Daphne, but she slaps him and leaves the room. The chief supervisor calls for her to be brought in for repairs. She is a form of recreation and is programmed to respond to the guest's desires. In the saloon, Peter wakes up on the floor with a bad hangover. Unconscious cowboys are lying all over the floor. John is still sleeping it off. In the castle, the medieval knight has gone downstairs for some breakfast, but the Black Knight is there, and he challenges the medieval knight to a duel. The queen enters and watches as they fight with swords. The Black Knight is fighting ferociously and cuts the arm of the medieval knight, before stabbing him in the stomach. Oh my god, he's just killed a human guest. In the control room, they're having big problems. They can't control the robots and they're trying to cut the power. Back in the West World, John and Peter walk out into the street and head to the hotel. But before they can get there, the gunslinger steps out and challenges John. The gunslinger shoots John in the chest, and John can't believe that it actually happened. He shoots John again, then holsters his gun. John is lying dead on the ground. Peter can't believe what he just witnessed. Now, the gunslinger is telling Peter to draw his gun. Peter is shocked. He turns and runs for cover as gunslinger starts shooting at him. As Peter runs through the town, the gunslinger walks after him and watches as Peter rides a horse out of the barn and out of town. The gunslinger then finds a horse and rides after Peter. In the Roman world, all the robots have gone crazy and are killing each other and the guests. In the control room, they're starting to worry because they've lost control of all the robots, and they can't get the power back to open the doors, so they might suffocate. Meanwhile, Peter is out of town, frantically riding his horse to get away from the gunslinger. As he rides along the top of a ridge, the gunslinger uses a rifle and shoots at Peter, knocking his hat off his head. Peter rides into a ravine and dismounts, then finds a place to hide and wait for the gunslinger. But the gunslinger ambushes Peter, shooting at him, and Peter narrowly escapes but leaves his gun behind. Peter rides off with Gunslinger in pursuit. He finds a technician changing a wheel on an electric service cart who tells him that all the robots have gone crazy, and he can't escape the gunslinger, but Peter has an idea of how to get away. As he rides off, the gunslinger shoots the technician. Peter comes to the boundary of Westworld, but he keeps on riding till he comes to the boundary of the Roman world. He leaves his horse, and as he runs through the Roman world, he sees bodies lying everywhere. Peter finds a manhole and removes the cover to climb down into the service corridors below. He finds a locked control room and looks through the window at the dead operators. On one of the monitors, he can see the gunslinger walking through the Roman world. Peter enters the service room where they repair the robots. He finds a bottle of hydrochloric acid and has an idea. Now, we see the gunslinger walking through the service room, inspecting the robots as he proceeds. As he gets to Peter, Peter quickly sits up and throws the acid into the face of the gunslinger, and it starts to burn his face. As he turns away, Peter makes a run for it. Peter stops in the corridor to catch his breath when, at the end of the corridor, the gunslinger appears and fires a shot at Peter. But he can't shoot anymore because the gun's battery is flat. He throws the gun down and continues after Peter. Peter finds his way into the medieval world and enters the banquet room. He finds the medieval knight lying dead with a sword in his stomach, and the queen and the black knight are sitting on the thrones, apparently disabled. The gunslinger enters the room and Peter walks behind the thrones. The gunslinger's heat sensors can detect Peter's body heat, but when Peter moves around and walks past the burning torches, the gunslinger gets confused by the other heat sources. Just when Peter thinks he's safe, the gunslinger makes a sudden lunge at him, but Peter grabs one of the burning torches and sets the gunslinger on fire. The gunslinger staggers around, completely ablaze. Peter walks away and he finds his way down to the dungeon, where he hears a woman's voice calling for help. He finds her and carries her to a seat. As he tries to give her some water, she keeps repeating, "No water, no water." As he pours some water into her mouth, sparks fly out from the side of her head. She looks so real. As he walks up the stairs, looking at her in disbelief, a completely burned and blackened gunslinger appears next to Peter. The gunslinger reaches out to Peter, but then falls face down to the floor, seemingly finished. As Peter watches, the gunslinger lifts himself up on one arm, rolls onto his back, and all of his components short-circuit and catch fire, finally destroyed. Peter climbs a few more steps, then sits down and relaxes for the first time in a while. In his head, he can hear the advertising slogan for Delos resounding over and over. Like and subscribe to watch more videos like this, and don't forget to turn on your notifications. That really helps my channel. Thanks for watching.